All right, so here we go again. Now, this is the E29 Podcast, and today I have a very special guest, someone I've known for quite a while. We've already actually been talking for about 2 hours about baseball and just life in general. So I'd like to welcome University of Redlands infield coach Nick Theodorou. Nick, thanks for coming.
Absolutely, Ernie. Thanks for inviting me and the 2 hour pre-talk.
Well, we're all good and warmed up. But so, we've gone through stories and we've been chatting for a while, and we've had these conversations before. But when you get to be more my age than yours, you're telling the same stories again. But just for reaccounting, why don't you let everybody know how you took your journey in baseball and then where you are now and what you're doing lately?
So I'm a local guy, Rialto kid, like Ernie, actually.
That's why you're here.
Yeah, that's right. Eisenhower High School. I was very fortunate to get recruited to go play UCLA, play baseball at UCLA. Coach Adams actually asked me to be a recruited walk-on. Which I don't think they even have anymore. I don't know if they do that anymore. But I had other opportunities to go play either at UC Riverside and Cal State Long Beach, but I chose to go to UCLA. I don't know what it was about UCLA. My brother went to UCLA before I did as a student, as a traditional student. And I would go and visit when I was 14, 15 years old. And I just felt like that was the place I needed to go. And so I took a chance. They took a chance on me, and I took a chance on myself. Where I decided to go to UCLA without any kind of baseball money, and no scholarship or anything like that. And it ended up working out for me. And I played 5 years there. I had to redshirt my first year because I was there to ideally replace a leadoff hitter, a little-known guy named David Roberts, who was a leadoff hitter at UCLA, and it worked out where, DR came back his fifth year, and I followed him, like a little puppy dog, and tried to learn everything I could from him, and then he got drafted as a senior, and then I came in, and then I started making my way in as a 4-year starter and what have you. But it was just, I think it allowed me to kind of mature and really understand the program and baseball at a higher level than I was previously kind of aware of at that time. And then from there, you play and you go and play summer ball or whatever. And I got drafted by the Dodgers my senior year, and so I went off and played 8 years professionally and got as high as AAA for basically 3 years. On the 40-man a few years with the Dodgers, and never got a chance, which we were just talking about and laughing about. Never got a chance to play actually a day in Los Angeles, other than the winter workouts and stuff that we would have at Dodger Stadium in the winter. But it was an awesome ride, and then with that I retired. I wouldn't say retired, right? I retired at age 30. Well, I was 31. I was going to be 31 in that season. And then I just decided that I wanted to try to use my education at UCLA that I was able to get, and it worked out well. Where I did find myself back into the athletic department. I actually had to make a decision between the athletic department and the Arizona Diamondbacks. Actually, I had an opportunity to go be their professional scout, and it was just one of those things where I just felt more strongly about UCLA than I did going back into pro ball. I just didn't feel the uncertainty of pro ball at that time in my career. It was tough for me because I didn't want to go to a new place and then a year later, the whole regime gets fired, and then all of a sudden you're scrambling for another job. And at that time, I just wasn't ready to do that again. And so went through UCLA went back to UCLA, started raising money in the athletic department for 4 years. Went there to made my way from the athletic department to alumni association, and then now I'm actually recruiting fundraisers to come to UCLA. And while I was doing that, I've always been connected to baseball. That's something that has never gone away. I've always either been doing some sort of individual lessons, or at one point in 2008, I want to say, I was the infield coach over at Cal State LA with my old hitting coach from UCLA, Vince Barron-Healy, who's now the head coach. And then a couple of years ago, the pitching coach who was with Cal State, with Vince Barron-Healy, moved out to University of Redlands, and they had an opening at University of Redlands, and he gave me a call, and Chris Hernandez, and and said, hey, why don't you come talk to Aaron Hawley, who's the head coach, and see if it makes sense for you to come work with our infielders, and kind of that's how it all came full circle, and that's where I am now.
Interesting, because we were talking about that earlier with one of our first guests, and how everybody has a chain. We're all kind of connected somewhere through baseball. And you mentioned Chris, and by the way, if Chris is listening, you're next. I'm going to be calling you or texting you next.
I can text him too.
Yeah, we can definitely get him in here. But the best part about doing this is that, one, I get to talk to buddies and tell stories, and it's always fun just to listen. And then for you, one of the stories that I remember that I think would be really good for some of our high school players that might be listening, I always enjoyed the story of how you actually were recruited by Gary at Eisenhower High School.
So yeah, I by no means was I a blue chip recruit. Now I could do a couple things baseball wise. I could run and I could throw, but I was still undersized. I was at the time, my senior year, I was probably 147 pounds. I was, 5'9" with my spikes on, but I could run and I could throw, and I had a good idea what I was doing at the plate. And so actually my brother he was still at UCLA after a UCLA game. He actually literally blindly walked into the baseball office and said, hey, I have a brother that wants to come play baseball at UCLA. All the other coaches kind of laughed at him, except for Coach Adams. Mm-hmm. And if you know Coach Adams, he's like the nicest human being in the world. So he actually was like, okay, well, who's your brother? Who's he play for? So, my brother said he's an Eisenhower kid. And so Coach Adams said, well, who does he play scout ball, right? And so my scout team was with the Toronto Blue Jays, and it was with Mr. Cole. I just lost his first name, Cole. He would kill me because he's on my Facebook. So when he
sees this, he's gonna.
Yeah. Oh man, he's gonna kill me. Anyways, I'll remember the name before it's all said and done. I promise. But and so he called Coach Adams called the scout over with Toronto and was like, hey, what kind of kid is he? And the way he characterized me was, Nick, he's a field rat, mm-hmm. right? He's your kind of player, Gary. You got to go see him. So he came to see me against Colton. Actually, we were playing Colton High School at Ganesha tournament, but it was off-site somewhere. It wasn't even at Colton or at Eisenhower. And I went 0 for 3 with a strikeout. And the next day, Gary calls me and says, Nick, I want you to come to UCLA. And after that game, I was totally dejected because I knew he was there. He was wearing his big UCLA coat, and my parents knew he was there, and everybody. It was like a big old thing, and I'm like, oh man, I didn't have a good day at all. And so I said, Coach, that's fantastic. I said, why? I had such a bad game. He goes, let me tell you something. He goes, you hit a comebacker back to the pitcher, and you got to first base in under 4 seconds. He goes, that's pretty good. He goes, you dove for a ball in center field that the second baseman should have easily backed up and caught, and you missed it. But he goes, I didn't even think you were coming close. Then you got up and you overthrew the third baseman, right? And he goes, you really have some pop on your arm. I really like that. And I said, wow. And he goes, and then when you struck out, he goes, you really, you took it personally, like it was something that really bothered you. And he goes, we're going to need to tone that down a little bit because I like that passion. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, oh, okay, Coach, thanks. Like, what do I need to do, whatever? And he goes, well, I already know that academically you're strong, and I don't have to worry about you in the classroom. He's like, I want you to come and throughout the fall be with us, and we'll decide then after the fall if we want to keep you. I said, great, I'm coming, even though I already had other offers. But I just thought that was such a unique way of recruiting me, because usually when you go see guys and if they don't do well, typically scouts would be like, not so much, Yeah. But he was looking at it on a very like skill base, competency base kind of, can he do this A, B, and C? Now, scouts can, professional scouts do that, but I don't know if college necessarily coaches, they tend to see, will they fit in my program? They, if they're not like 5-tool guy or 5-star guys, they're 4-star guys, because everybody now, the recruiting classes are such big deals, right? Mm-hmm. Like they promote their recruiting classes, and they have to, hey, this guy's a 5-star guy, this guy's a 4-star guy. How many 5-star guys did you get? Mm-hmm. and I was probably a 2.5-star guy, but coach didn't care. He was looking at specific skill sets so that he could probably plug me in as that new leadoff hitter at UCLA, and it just worked out that way.
Well, one of the cool things about that story is, and I don't know if you know this now, but that actually qualifies as an old school recruiting story. It's like a movie where you build up to the last 5 minutes where that coach comes with the big jacket and the clipboard, and you're waiting to find out, did I or didn't I? And, like you just mentioned, they don't do that anymore. So, I mean, for you to be able to tell that story, it's not something that's going to happen almost ever, now. But that's what makes that so cool, because early recruiting, kids know well in advance, and for lack of a better word, they know what they need to work on before they get to school, because they've already established where they're going.
Yeah.
And so, I always enjoyed that when you told that, just because, especially now, because it doesn't happen anymore. So now being on the Redlands side of it, I know you're doing more of the on-field training and working with the infielders. But from what you've experienced through the college recruiting process, high school, pro, and working on through now, what do you think as a high school athlete I need to focus on more that you may not see emphasized by videos, training, things like that?
So this is going to sound really funny because it's kind of innate, but it's not something that we teach usually in the United States. And I say the United States specifically because I'll get into that. But we have to teach our kids how to catch the baseball. I don't think there's enough emphasis in being in the right position in order to catch the baseball. Mm-hmm. I feel like sometimes we care more about a position to get in front of the ball, mm-hmm. right, versus being in a position to catch the baseball. And however that is, whether it's we're using our feet, we're using our body. But I think we really got to focus and emphasize on the body position that allows us to catch the baseball. And I mean, I see kids all the time where that's not necessarily what they're thinking about. They're thinking about their hands. They're thinking about kind of, well, if I miss it, I'm going to block it. And that's not necessarily the way that I would teach mm-hmm. it. I know when I, playing all the years that I did with the different Latin American kids, they never thought about getting in position to knock a ball down. They always thought about catching it. And in fact, most of the times they were in position to use their glove to catch the baseball. And I just felt like it's just a difference in theory as far as how we do it here in the United States versus how they do it in Latin America. And mm-hmm. quite honestly, they're a little bit better at it than mm-hmm. we are collectively. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I always talk about that too. And we were actually just discussing that before we came in, that some of our kids, for one of the things I used to call was, you're taught how to field like you're dancing the Macarena, right foot, left hand, left hand, funnel, pull. So everything's so robotic. And when you get around some of those Latin players, they already know the ball's going to go in my glove. How am I going to be in the best position to make the next move after that? And so, again, some of the old school teachings, and you might have been taught this way too, but a good option was letting the ball hit you in the chest.
Yeah.
I was never a fan of that. I always liked the glove as option one, and let's keep it there. But, I remember too, one of the things that when you and I first met, you had Unieski out.
Yeah.
And watching him field. And I was telling one of the gentlemen out in the lobby that was probably the first video breakdown from before, because you had, I think it was Bob Clarendon or one of the AV guys would come out and they were videotaping him taking ground balls. And I remember you and I watching, and I think it was right about the time that you were going to be going to camp with the Pirates. I think
it was so that year, the first year was going to. Were you talking about when we actually watched the video, or when we watched the video
at Eisenhower?
When we had him at Eisenhower, that was 2004. So okay. I was going to Big League camp actually with the Dodgers that year.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's different. When you watch Unieski catch the. I mean, I remember the first day he was out there, and you watched how the ball went into his glove. And now, mind you, I've been doing this for like 8 years, right. 7 years at the time, right? And I'm like, holy moly, like what? How does it go in the glove like that? It was just different. He was in a different position consistently than I was. Mm-hmm. And like you said, he was never thinking about catching the ball. Mm-hmm. That was a given for him, mm-hmm. right? And for a lot of the Latin guys, they're always just they're always thinking about, okay, what's my most efficient move next to get the ball out to first base mm-hmm. or to second base or wherever your throw was. It wasn't catching the ball. Catching the ball was a given, mm-hmm. right? Being in the right position. So yeah, he was I mean, you got to hit us ground balls, and you get to see the difference. But I will say, I felt like I evolved a lot that off season just by being with him.
And even thinking back on that, one of the things that I remember learning from him was that the angles aren't set.
No.
Meaning that anytime the ball was hit to him, he would create an angle, and there was a center axis of it, but where his glove rotated would create the angle. And it was almost as if you were watching someone on a unicycle with a glove, because he could back up, go forward, and the ball just always seemed to be in the middle, and he would just move through the ball whatever direction, whether it was feeding a double play, throwing to second, throwing home.
You bring up a really good point. It's something I actually talk a lot about to my infielders, and something in the United States where it's almost like for infielders, it's almost like taboo to talk about, is the ability to back up, right? I think, it was always like, oh, you can't back up on a ball. You can't let the ball play you. And that was always something that you hear growing up, and you still even hear. Trust me, I've gone to my kids. He's 8 years old, and he's got, oh, you backed up, let the ball play you. Listen, if you know what you're doing with your feet, backing up is actually a productive move if you back up to catch the right hop, and you back up appropriately to put yourself in the right position to throw. If you can do those two things at the right time to back up, you're going to be in a better position than if you go forward and get an in-between hop and have it clank off of your chest. Right? So that's something I learned by watching Uniski. He had an innate ability to move his feet both forward and backwards to make sure that he caught the ball in between of the crest, right? In between, before it started going down and before it started coming back up. And now, if he could come get the short hop, he'd come get the short hop. But he would never get the in-between hop. And if he did, he would catch it in a position where he was able to use his hands, and then he would be able to replace his feet and make a good throw. But very rarely did that happen.
Yeah, and it's amazing because it's hard sometimes when you've been trained one way your whole life to wrap your head around a concept that, hey, I'm opening up more options by creating more angles. If I'm just trying to square the ball up and get centered to the ball and that ball moves right or left, I can't go anywhere. But if I'm okay opening up or closing a foot, then now I've created more range for myself to put my body in that glove.
Well, and the other thing, you said something else there too, closing that foot. And what I think people don't the way to visualize that is you typically always want to have your left foot forward when you're catching the baseball. So many times in college baseball, I see right foot forward, left foot back, right? So if you're at shortstop, you can envision this, even at second base. If your right foot is forward and your left foot is back, right, your shoulders are angled where? Right? They're angled toward right field.
Right.
So are you going to catch the ball and throw to right field? No. Right? But if your left foot is forward and your right foot is a little bit back and you catch the ball, now you're automatically angled toward first base. Right? So all you have to do is replace feet and throw. And I see so many, even at the Division I level, right, college infielders, and in high school, they teach kids to have their right foot forward, and their left foot back, and I guess that allows their hands to get down below them. But to me, that's something I learned really quickly in pro ball, is that you always that left foot needs to be at least even or in front of your right foot when you're catching the ball. The other piece to that is, and I was just looking at a Twitter, actually Chris Hernandez sent it to me, of Lindor, early Lindor and now Lindor, and the back angle, right? The angle of the back when at presentation of the hands to catch the ball is parallel to the ground. Okay, it's not perpendicular, right? Like we're taught to be perpendicular sometimes in the United States to just get down on and make sure that the ball doesn't get past us, right?
Almost like a catcher,
right? No, you are down in a triple threat position, almost like a basketball player. We're in that triple threat position, but it's a more athletic position. You can move, you can create those angles at Uniski. And when you look back at Uniski, his back angle was parallel with the ground, right? He never was like straight up and down, ever, right? He was always trying to figure out what that next move was when the ball was moving. And so those two things for me, when I focus on my infielders at University of Redlands, I focus on body position. Okay, I want that back to be parallel at all times. And it's just like hitting. If you're doing this, right, your eyes are moving. If you're coming up with that with every hop, your eyes are moving. The ball doesn't dictate where you put your body, right? It doesn't matter how high the hop is, right? There's no reason for you to come up and then have to come back down, right? If you don't need to. Now, obviously, if it's a high chopper and you got to jump, that's different. But I mean, we're talking about a routine ground ball that comes up. Just because the ball comes up doesn't mean you have to come up, right? And by staying down, you actually see it better, and you're more efficient with your feet, anyways, and your hands. To be honest with you, so. There's a lot of things that those are the two things, the body position and keeping your feet kind of in the right spot are the two things that I really look for infielders, actually, University of Redlands.
So when you get, let's say, some of your new players in, freshmen, or maybe you're working some high school guys out there.
Yeah.
What is the first thing that you try to instill in them if they're a little behind, let's say, in some of their training? What is the first thing that you prioritize?
Body position.
Okay.
And that's the hardest one to prioritize too, because kids aren't necessarily taught to stay in that body position, and it puts a lot more pressure on your legs. So your legs get a little bit of a workout, so you get tired. Yeah. Right. So keeping their body parallel is hard to do, but it's something that I feel like if you can keep your body in the same spot, it's just like hitting, right? If you can get set in the same spot every time you land, right, you have a lot more potential to be successful because you're not moving all over the place, right? So we got to keep everything consistent. Baseball is hard enough. There's too many variables. Right. Let's take some variables out and make sure that your body position is exactly in the same spot every time. And that's hard to do, especially the freshmen that come in. At first, they don't I don't think fully understand what I'm trying to get them to do. And then usually by the second year, like this year, I had a couple kids that really took what we were doing last year and really started to incorporate it this year, and it's night and day, the kind of the way their hands work and the way that they're able to feel the baseball. Yeah,
one of the things that understanding the situation with everything right now, I'm actually glad that I'm seeing more videos and more instruction online for infield and defensive drills and footwork and things like that, because for so long everybody was a hitting coach. Everybody wanted to teach hitting. Everybody, because it's easy. Yeah. If you're a coach, you're just flipping the balls or tossing it to them, and yes. And I think sometimes especially at the lower levels, it's tough to work with infielders if you can't physically do the moves or you don't specifically know that. And a lot of times, I'm happy with a guy that can, field 3, knock down 1 or 2, and we're not gonna get too many errors out of him. And so it's hard to work on because, like you said, it's actually physical when you do it correctly. Correct. And learning it is a lot more of a physical activity, I think, than hitting. Everyone enjoys hitting. I think that's why most of us like baseball. Yeah. But I'm glad to see that. And so when you're working there with your players, do you have a favorite fundamental drill, or is there something? Everyone has kind of a go-to drill that I like.
So, I usually try to at least 3 times a week get them on their knees and hit them ground balls from about 60 feet. And I look for 2 things. Again, I look for body position, which on your knees is really difficult to do because when you're on your knees, you're more apt to kind of be straight up with your posture. And we need you to hunch over with your shoulders and make sure you're using your hands. The other thing that I think is really, really important, and I say this a lot too, is your glove has to be connected to your chin. And well, you're not going to do that, right? Like, but your glove has to be. I don't want to see a ball like this and your chin like up here. Like your glove and your chin have to be connected on everything, right? Like even on a ball that you have to reach for, you see a lot of kids that are like this, or you see a lot of kids that are like that, where they're extended. There's too much area between the glove and the chin. Sure. Right, and if you're going to catch a ball down there, why not catch it and bend down, and your eyesight is better. You're more accurate with your glove movements. So I see that all the time. You got to stay connected. I know that's a term that we use in hitting too, is staying connected. But for me, your glove and your chin, and I know that sounds funny, but I don't know. And this kind of evolved actually last year. You got to stay connected to your chin because if your chin is down, your eyes are going to be down, right? Everyone can say keep your eyes down or keep your head down or all that kind of, but for me, I think the chin is a word that you don't hear very often in baseball, right? So that's why I say keep your glove and your chin connected all the time, because if you can keep them connected while you're catching the baseball, right, then you'll have more success because your eyes are going to allow you to see the ball go in your glove.
Yeah. Well, one of the things too that I've noticed, and I'm going to have you go into another story that I remember you telling me, but it's actually been more prevalent now, because now when you watch a college game, a major league game, the fielders are more athletic, the good ones.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes from not necessarily playing multiple sports, because that's kind of a thing of the past. There's a few guys. I mean, you played multiple sports in high school, but again, now you're an old guy.
Yeah.
So, I remember you telling me that when you were in, I believe it was UCLA, you worked out with Brian Giles. And you would tell me that he would never work on the basic stuff. He would have you work on the hard plays.
Yeah.
You just tell a little bit.
So Brian Giles, if you remember, if you're my age or older, some people think of Brian Giles as a big left-handed power guy. This Brian Giles actually played second base with Harold Reynolds in the Seattle Mariners, in the big leagues in Seattle Mariners, and he was around West LA when I was at UCLA, and he came to a game one day and he saw me play. I got introduced to him, and he's like, "Man, if you ever need to work on anything, infield wise, you let me know." Well, it just so happened that the next year, Coach Adams called me in and said, "Hey, you're going to be a full-time second baseman." Well, at that time, I panicked because most of the time I was in the outfield, and I'm like, "Full-time second base? How the heck am I going to do that?" I was just kind of a spot guy, just in case. And so there was no other spot. We had 3 All-Americans in the outfield, and the only spot, and Troy Gloss was at short, and we had another All-American at third. It was like, well, there's the only spot at second base, and you're the only guy that hit over 300 last year, so we're going to put you there. Okay. And so I had to figure it out, and I called Brian Giles, and I was always waiting for Brian to just hit me ground balls right at me. And he never hit ground balls right at me. And he's like, "Look, you're supposed to make those plays." He used to tell me all the time, "Those balls right at you, you're supposed to make those. But what he would do is he would teach me how to be athletic and how to catch balls to either side, right? We would always work on running throws on the run, throws, especially at second base, throws where I'm going to have to make the pivot over at second base. He was a big proponent of making sure we get that out at second base. So he's like, we're going to work more on collecting that out at second base than we are the ball right at you, right? And in doing that, I learned how to catch the ball right at me, right? Because you can apply the same type of mechanics and things that he was teaching me by running. He wanted me to apply the same mechanics of the ball right at me. So now there's a ball right at me. That doesn't mean you just stand there, right? You still be athletic. You still go and try to catch the ball in the right time, meaning on the right hop. Or if you need to back up, which is something, again, I learned better with Uniski, but he did start to talk to me about that. It was eye-opening because he never thought that teaching someone how to catch the ground ball right at him was the way to do it.
Sure.
Right? Now, that said, I do hit balls right at my infielders too, because they need to do that. But I also try to teach them how to be athletic, how to make sure they know how to make the play on the run, how to make sure they can make that turn or that pivot from short or second, because the double play is such a big deal in baseball. It's actually now I think it's a more underrated play than it was when I was kind of coming up, because there's not as much a focus on it. I feel like everything's more about velocity and strikeouts, right? Than contact and double plays, which to me makes no sense. But that's how baseball has evolved, and that's what it is. But for me, and now at the Division III level, right? A ground ball double play is a huge deal. It's a huge play. It's a momentum play, and it unfortunately the pitching isn't as good, right? So if you can make one pitch and get 2 outs, that's a big deal. And so we work on that stuff a lot.
Yeah, and if you look now, what we started to talk about, you watch a lot of the games that you see, and all of the infielders are athletic.
Yeah.
Even your first baseman.
Yep.
You see first baseman making plays that traditionally a third baseman would make, and you see guys now practicing those plays again. And so, essentially, I'm not sure how long ago that was, but you were working on things that were still foundational today. And I think sometimes with all the new information that comes out and all the different types of videos and things like that, sometimes kids get caught up and forget that things that work 20 years ago still work today. And so, I think 20 years ago, some of those drills still work.
Oh, they still
you
work.
know, and those guys that were playing in the 80s and the 90s, they could still field ground balls, and they were still athletic, and not as much as today, but they could still work on some of those same things.
So that is the I guess most common misconception of big league play is that they all can hit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they all can hit, but they all know how to play defense too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there very rarely are there the Jose Cansecos where they can get away with, you know, bouncing a ball off their head and having to go in the. I mean, he's going to make that up by hitting 40 home runs.
Right.
Okay, fine. But, you know, if you look at all the guys now that are big power hitters, they can play defense too. They catch the baseball. And if they can't catch it, they at least know how to control it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that it doesn't necessarily turn into a two-base or three-base play versus it just being a single. So, you know, I think in a lot of, you know, in this, especially now where everything is home runs and strikeouts, everything, the defensive piece is a little bit
Mm-hmm.
kind of forgotten about. Now they're starting to talk about, you know, the defensive efficiencies and that kind of stuff, but that's only in the last couple of years are they really looking at that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, historically, big league players, they know how to catch the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And very rarely is there that one person where it's like, oh, we don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
They all know how to catch it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they can hit, but they all. I mean, that no one really talks about that. But most everybody can catch the baseball in the big leagues.
Well, and you know that doesn't sell tickets, and that doesn't.
No.
It's not very entertaining on TV. But you also know you can't have 9 Cansecos out there because it's,
No.
it's a softball game.
Yeah.
So you know now one of the things that you see with kids now is that they're going back to maybe not the traditional soccer, football, baseball seasonal schedule. Everything's year round now, but more of them are working on flexibility. They're
Mm-hmm.
working on speed and agility, and incorporating those things that we used to get from all of those other sports.
Yeah.
And I think maybe learning how to directly apply them to baseball, to where before maybe I was a really good football player and they wanted to see how I could convert to be a baseball player depending on the situation. But going back to some of your career, maybe tell the story about your time with the I know it's a bunch of stories.
You know all my stories.
I do. I like them. I mean, that's what baseball is, man. That's the best part. So when you were in the Olympics, that's a special experience. There's not a lot of people that can say that they did that.
Yeah, no, I was fortunate to be able to go play in the Olympics. I did get to play for the host team in 2004. I was with the Greek Olympics, or the Greek Olympic team, just because you know, obviously I have my heritage is both my mom and dad are Greek, and both my grandparents came from Greece. My mom actually grew up until she was 9 years old in Greece. So I've had that in my background, and I felt like kind of privileged to be able to go do that for, you know, kind of my grandparents and the family back there. But yeah, I mean, being able to opening ceremonies. I mean, I try to think about opening ceremonies now. I still don't remember touching the track, walking around, and I know I walked around it because there's footage of it. I don't remember actually touching the ground when I was wild. I remember looking at those stands and, you know, 85,000 people or whatever. That was pretty cool. I also remember waiting 6 hours to do it too. To walk. I mean, literally, we waited 6.5 hours to be the last country to walk. But then also getting a chance to play against the international types of teams where you have different types of flavors. Where there was Cuba, we got to play against Cuba, we got to play against Japan, Australia, and they all had different, you know, they all emphasized different things, and they were all different in good ways. It was cool to see baseball played in different ways, and it was just a really unique experience that, you know, when I came back from the Olympics, you know, my whole goal my whole life was to play in the major leagues. Mm-hmm. And then all the major leaguers that I knew, the guys that I played with that were in the major leagues, their big question for me was, how were the Olympics? Yeah. And I'm like, dude, what are you asking me about the Olympics? I want to know about the big league. How's St. Louis? You know, like I want to know about St. Louis. But I didn't realize how big of a deal it was until afterwards, when everyone started to come up to me and they're asking me about the Olympics, and it was pretty cool. One of the coolest things, I went to a Dodger game about a year and a half after, and I was still with the Dodgers at the time, or barely, And my brother kind of looked at me and he goes, there's 55,000 people here. He goes, how many do you think played in the Olympics? And you know, you don't put things in those types of perspectives when you're actually doing it. Mm. And I never really thought about it until he actually kind of did that. And I thought that was pretty cool. But it was a unique experience. It was cool. My family was there. We got to go to my mom's village and see some of my aunts and uncles and cousins and stuff that I'd never seen before. They came and watched me play, which, you know, Greek people don't know anything about baseball. I was the leadoff hitter. I was the first hitter ever to, you know, have an at bat for Greece. And when I walked, it was like I just hit a home run. It was like the coolest thing ever. I walked. I started walking to first base, and everyone just went crazy because I don't think they knew what was going on. And so it was just a kind of a overall just a unique experience in the fact that you know, playing for Greece, even though Greece doesn't have a history of baseball, we've been trying to get Greece baseball in Greece kind of to have some grassroots, and they do have some baseball teams out there. They play 7-inning games and they're 35 years old, but they're still trying to play baseball out there, it's just something where it's like you feel good about trying to be, you know, those I don't know, just being torchbearers and try to bring Major League Baseball to a place that really never embraced baseball before. Right. And the atmosphere was a lot like soccer games. It really was. Like I said, like a walk was like a big deal. It's just like a run in a soccer game, right? So it was, you know, you hit a pop fly, they would go crazy, and then they realized they caught it, and it was like, oh, okay, whatever. But it was just a really interesting reactions that you don't get, you know, when you're in the United States. But overall, you know, very lucky to be part of that team, and we actually are a really close team. We still are in contact today. We interact with each other, text message each other at least 2 or 3 times a month. We actually probably will do I want to try to do a 20-year reunion in 24 and get everybody together, which would be pretty cool. I know. I
didn't realize it's been that long. Wow.
I know.
Well, I mean, a big tribute to you. I've never watched an opening ceremonies, but I watched that one to see if I could see you on there. And I mean, again, one of the best things about that, when you step back and you think about it, is all of the players that have gone through the major leagues. Yeah. And then you look at growing up here in the United States, a lot of the Olympic sports we really didn't have access to. So you were limited as far as what you could aspire to be if it was something in the Olympics. And then at the time when you were there, baseball was relatively new. I think at the same time they brought in softball. So now all of a sudden something's opened up that was never even an option. And then when you look at the number of people that actually got to do it as compared to played in the United States professionally, I mean, you're even a smaller number than you think, you know, just being in there. And so that's something that, you know, being in a small select group of anything is always a big honor. So, I mean, that's always something I think that, you know, I was really proud of you for doing that and happy that you got to do that opportunity because, you know, looking back on that, I mean, that's something I'm sure you're going to tell your kids more about as they get older, and they'll appreciate it. They're not into baseball right now. I mean, they like being active and stuff, and I'm not that dad that pushes baseball on them. And you know, it's funny. My wife sometimes is like, "Hey, you're the baseball guy. Why don't you go out there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but I want them to want to do it. I don't want them to feel like, you know, dad. You know, this is dad's thing." I had, you know, that was my career. That was my career path. They're going to have their own career and their own career path. If it ends up being baseball, great. If it ends up being soccer, if it ends up being music, whatever it is, I want to support them in whatever it is. But I'm not the crazy baseball dad. Well, that's good. I mean, I know that they play, and I know that you know, they're getting into that age where you're going to be more involved in whatever it is they do. But you played soccer too, right? I think.
I did. Yeah, I did. Soccer, football, basketball, actually, as well. So I was, and then in the summers when I wasn't playing baseball, I would go play tennis because my brother was a tennis player at Eisenhower, and so I just learned how to play, basically. I mean, and I think, you know, doing a lot of that cross training was helpful. And it kept me healthy, and it kept me, you know, kind of agile enough to be able to kind of then focus in on baseball.
Well, it's interesting because conversations I've had with other players, I was talking to Mike one time recently, and his wife is, I believe she's 6 foot. She played at Mississippi State softball, and he's got 2 daughters now. And he was saying, what do you think I should, work with softball? I said, absolutely not. They're going to be that tall. Teach them tennis. Well, I told tennis. I said, tennis. Be the dad that goes down to Florida and just watches them, back and forth. And then even Herb was telling me how strong his little girl was, and he said that his dad started taking her out to golf. And I said, well, do you know how to golf? And he says, no. I said, perfect. Then you can go out and it's fun. Yeah. And they can play. It's something she can do with grandpa. There's no pressure for her to learn. You're not a know-it-all, so she's going to enjoy doing it with you, and it's something she can do forever. Yep. And the pressure of team sports sometimes, especially here, whether it's basketball, soccer, anything like that. I said, but if it's a tennis or a golf, it's kind of your own discipline to practice. And if you can do it as a casual, fun event to work on, even better. And you can make it a family-oriented thing. And it's just funny because right away they went back to, do we get them into softball or we get them into, no, don't do that. Do something that you can enjoy with them. So
eventually they're going to choose what they want to do, and you just want to be supportive of it. And I tell my wife, look, if my oldest right now is the most athletic of the two, and if he chooses baseball, and I tell her, look, if he chooses baseball, he'll be able to catch up really quickly, and I'll be able to get him up to speed to wherever he wants to go. Mm-hmm. So I'm not too worried about that. It's just a matter of him wanting to do it. Yeah. So we'll see.
Well, and ultimately that's what it comes down to. There's only so far that a parent can take them. And then when you get to that level, it's more about the player than it is about the coaches and about the games and about the teams. If they don't have that drive and desire, it's not going to work. And that goes with their schoolwork. It goes with your job, whatever it is. So, that's a good lesson for them to learn. Well, listen, I took up a bunch of your time because we spent 2 hours off camera. But what I do want to do, because you have younger players or you have younger kids, I want you to kind of maybe give me a real quick snippet of what you think you would like to see happen in youth sports going forward. I know we were talking about now this situation kind of being a reset because kids aren't playing, there's no tournaments, there's nothing going on, so they're spending more time with their family, they're learning something new. What would you like to see, because you're coming from an athletic and an education background?
Yeah, I think this is a good time, actually. I'm not for the country or for the world as far as the pandemic is concerned, but it's a good time for families to reconnect. I think we lose that when every weekend there's a tournament and you're worried about being out of the house and just the baseball games. It's unfortunate, but a lot of the travel teams have gone to a point, and I know you have some travel teams, but it's gotten to a point where these kids play 100 games a year and they're 10 years old, and especially with baseball, it's such a repetitive sport that it as you're trying to grow, as these kids are trying to grow, and they're there's joints that haven't been matured yet, and just tendons and everything. Baseball's a tough sport for a kid that's 10, 12, 15 years old to be playing 100 games a year. Just because, any minor little tweak of their mechanics can really mess up their arm or mess up their legs or mess up anything long period of time or over a long period of time. So I think the emphasis on I wish there was more education on health, which I think there is starting to be, which is fantastic, because we never had, the information on eating and stretching and that kind of stuff when we were growing up. At least there's more information now, but and I also think there's got to be good rest time. I really do. I think this time to connect with families, I think there's got to be, whether it's family or not, just rest time from doing anything. And if you're playing baseball year round, great. Take 2 months and do nothing. Take 2 months and go to the beach and just relax and just kind of just decompress. As professional baseball players, we played from basically, well, it depends if you went and played winter ball or not, right? But if you didn't play winter ball, okay, we're playing or preparing to play from basically after Christmas, all the way until September or October. That's 9 months. Right, and so even then they would tell us, look, just step away from it for a while, and give yourself, some time to recover, and that was, we were adults, we were professionals at the time, so I can't even imagine, what a 10-year-old or 12-year-old feels like. Now they recover a lot faster because they're 10 and 12, but after 3, 4, 5 seasons or cycles of that, I think it's just one of those things where, the emphasis on recovery, the emphasis on mental emphasis, I guess, on feeling better, with your body, but also getting back into the academics. I mean, that's a key piece too. I was an academic kid, but the academics allowed me to grow into my baseball, which I know that sounds funny, but like I said earlier, with my opportunity to go to UCLA, Coach Adams never had to worry about me academically, right? So that's why honestly, if you ask him now, that's why he took a chance on me. It wasn't because I was such a great baseball player, right? I had some skills that he thought he could refine, but he also knew he didn't have to worry about me in the classroom, right? So that allowed me extra time to then allow my baseball to kind of catch up to where I needed it to be, because I wasn't ready to start my freshman year, right? So the fact that I was academic, the fact that I was going to an institution, and it didn't have to be UCLA, it could be any of them. It could be Cal State LA, it could be anywhere. The fact that you're able to be solid enough academically to allow your baseball and your maturity and your physical maturity to catch up, that I think is, I think people think of it the other way around.
Right.
They think of it as like, oh, I'm going to be great athletically, and then whatever happens academically, we'll figure that out. To me, there's only a certain handful of guys that can do that, right? And those guys are easy to find. Right, Troy Gloss was easy to find, right? Because he was 6'6", 250, right? Like, and he could do all the things that I could do, but he was 6'6", 250, and hit the ball 500 feet. That's easy to find, okay? So those guys, the guys that throw 100 miles an hour at 16 years old, that's easy to find, right? You hear about that guy 100 miles away, right? But it's the guy that wants to be able to play baseball for a long period of time, however long that is, at different levels. Academics have to be there, because then that academic prowess or that education or that excellence will allow you to play more and allow you to grow as an athlete. And I think we get that mixed up. Right. I think we think, oh, let's just focus on our athletics first. We're gonna get drafted at 18. Okay, maybe, but you can't bank on that, right? And if you don't get drafted, or even if you do get drafted, the number one thing is, do you have leverage? Yeah. Right. And if you don't have anything academically, they're going to say, here's $1,500. Right. Go play. Where are you going to go do? Right. Go to junior college. Okay, great. We'll draft you again next year. Yeah. Here's another $1,500. Right. So so I think sometimes we get kind of focused on the wrong thing. Yes, you have to be good athletically, but you also have to be good academically. Yeah,
and I think too that you would probably agree to this too, that when you were going through all of that as a pro, you were eating differently than a high school or a 10-year-old especially. Totally. And when you came back from spring training, you didn't do anything physically. You didn't lift weights. You didn't train. You didn't ground ball. You had to give your body and your mind time to get away from that. Yeah, well.
I would say, and I tell this story too, I would say out of the 8 years that I played pro ball, at least 5 of those years, at least 5, maybe 6, I didn't count. When I would come back from pro ball, those first 2 weeks, I get sick. Like I literally, my body would just give up. It was like it knew that it was done, and I would get sick. And I would get sick like for 10 days, where I was sore throat, like fever, like I'd just be sick. And I think it was just exhaustion, to be honest with you. Yeah. And then my body would build back up, and then I'd start getting back in the weight room. Usually after Halloween is when I would start back up, and then I started doing some minor little baseball activities probably right after Thanksgiving, which that's really early, but that was just how I was. Yeah. But yeah, my body would crash.
Yeah. And kids don't see that. And then, again, on the academic part of it, I think a lot of times, if you were to look at your career, when your career finally came to an end, you took that academic side and made that the rest of your career. Yeah. A professional athlete, a career ends 30, 32 if you're lucky. Yeah. If you get to 35, now there's a few more guys playing past 35, but even then, if you're out at 40, you still have that time to, what am I going to do now? Yeah. And so I think being able to see things long term, but both of us would probably admit we didn't do that at 16, 17. But
but I was forced to do it. My parents were, academic was we couldn't have the athletic without the academic. And so I was fortunate to have my parents kind of push that. But yeah, I was always thinking athletically first, right? Because that's more fun. Sure. But yeah, I was always, and I had an older brother too that was very academic. And so that always helped push me a little bit too. But when you're 17 years old, you're thinking all athletics. But you need to have something kind of to get you back to center, and academics is kind of what you need.
Yeah. Well, hey, great, and I'll definitely have you back and please apologize for us keeping you a little bit longer. But I mean, we could probably keep going and talking. And I mean, we haven't talked baseball in about a year and a half. And so I mean, it's good. So I definitely want to have you back when you have some time.
Sure.
And hopefully, when things get back to somewhat normal, maybe we can come out to U of R and we can do something on the field. But
that'd be cool.
Again, thanks for your time and
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming out.
No, thank you, Ernie, and good luck with the podcast.
All right, man. It's good seeing you.
And nice seeing you.
All right.